no funerals. Hello everyone, it is Katie here from the Queen of Teen Fiction, and today I am here to talk about a book that has ruined me emotionally, and that book is Crooked Kingdom by the fabulous Leigh Bardugo. This book, I don't even have words. I have so many feelings and I'm still not over it. This is the sequel to Six of Crows and it is also the final book in the duology. And as you know, reading final books is a very stressful time, especially when you're as emotionally attached to the characters as I am to these ones. So it's safe to say that I was very nervous and worried going into this book. And I did have a reason to be nervous and worried because these characters have put through so much shit. Oh my god, do they suffer? But honestly, the ending was just so fantastically done. So although I had my heart completely torn out and stomped upon, it was mended again by the beautiful conclusion that this book offered. So I can't really say much without going into spoilery detail, but this book is a fantastic conclusion to the story that we see started in Six of Crows. I really loved Six of Crows, I enjoyed it a lot, but this book is 10 times better than Six of Crows, which is an impossible feat to do because that first book was so good. But yeah, this completely blew me out of the water. These characters are fantastic and you can't help but root for them, no matter how much they might be lacking in morals. Kaz, you complete and utter little shit that I love regardless, but you do root for them from start to finish and they are all so fantastically written. So if you haven't read this book yet, then oh my god, you are in for such a treat. If you haven't read Six of Crows yet, then please go ahead and do that because you are missing out. So that's about all I want to say in a spoiler-free section, really, because I just want to talk about everything. So if you haven't read the book, then please leave. I have posted a spoiler-free review of it on my blog, so I will leave a link to that in the description if you want to check that out. But for now, bye-bye to you. Okay, so let's talk about all the things. I did intend to take notes throughout reading this book so that I could talk about it properly afterwards, but that just completely went out of the window because there was no point in this book where I could stop and take the time to actually write composed notes. So this review is probably just going to be completely incoherent and I apologise, but I am emotional and excited and heartbroken all at the same time. So what I'm going to do is what I usually do and just talk about each of the characters and their stories. And then at the end, if there are things that I've missed, I'll go back and mention them. It's easier to do it that way because the plot within this book is so intricate and complex that it is desperately hard to try and summarise it. And you've already read it anyway, I hope. So you know what's happened, you know what's going on, you know what I'm talking about, hopefully. So let's start with Kaz. Kaz Brekker, the man with questionable morals. Well, I say man, but he's actually a boy. I forget that the characters in this are as young as they are because they've all been through so much. Like, Jesus Christ, they've seen things that no 16 and 17-year-olds should ever have to see. We just need to talk about how clever this boy is. Like, oh my god, he knows everything. He is on top of everything all the time. There were so many moments in this book where I was really worried for him. I thought that somebody had finally got the better of him. And then he manages to pull some new trick out of the bag when you think there is nothing else that he can do. He isn't always a nice character. He has made decisions that you might not agree with. But his backstory and his reasoning behind the decisions he makes is so fascinating and heartbreaking. Obviously we know he's out for revenge against Pekka Rowlands because of what happened to Geordie, his brother, which I'm still not over that story, by the way. These poor children. Pekka Rowlands, oh my god, I hate that man so much. So Kaz is still out for his blood, and oh boy does he get revenge on that worm of a man. The ending, oh my god! The way he handled it. That scene between Kaz, Inej and Pekka when Pekka thought that Kaz had his son that he kept secret from everyone. That was just so amazingly written and it was just tense and highly emotional and yeah, I don't know how I survived this book, to be honest. Of course, we can't talk about Kaz without talking about Inej. First of all, Inej. I love her so much. She's had some truly horrible and unimaginable things happen in her life, yet she's let none of that affect who she is as a person and how she sees the world. Even though she's been through all of this horrible stuff, she still sees good in everyone. She had her own little enemy to deal with in this book, that weird white assassin girl. What was her name? Is it Dunyasha? That's something that I need to apologise for, by the way. My pronunciation is terrible. So I apologise if I mess up a lot of the words. Also, Leigh had like a little thing in the back of the book where she literally told you how to pronounce all of the characters' names. Why is that in the back of the book? I could have done with that in the front of the book before I started reading it. So Inej has this assassin that appears in the book a couple of times and they go against each other, and she was creepy as hell. But yeah, Inej did her in the end. Well and truly ruined her. That's my baby! So Inej and Kaz. In the first book you could tell that they had feelings for each other, but obviously they're both pretty messed up. They've had messed up lives. Kaz especially finds it very difficult to deal with his feelings. So although he was in love with Inej, he couldn't actually express that to her. Also, what was really heartbreaking in this book is his lack of being able to touch people. Skin-to-skin contact takes him back to that time with Geordie, and I absolutely adore the way Leigh handled that in the book. Even though there is so much tension between Kaz and Inej throughout this book, and you're practically just screaming at them to kiss each other, I like that Leigh didn't make them do that, because realistically Kaz would not be able to handle that. It would take a long time for him to get to that point emotionally. So the way Leigh dealt with it was honestly just so perfect, and I praise her for that. That scene where he's cleaning Inej's wounds and putting the bandages on her, it was just such a beautiful scene, and it didn't need anything else other than that. This is a book that fully proves you don't need lots and lots of pages of two characters making out and lots of detail about that, because Kaz and Inej's relationship was still absolutely beautiful without it being completely physical. I'm just so happy with the way that was written. Also, the ending for those two, oh my god! Inej has been planning to go off on her ship and hunt down slavers, and then at the end Kaz actually buys her a ship, and then her parents turn up, and oh my god! They're perfect individually, and they're perfect together as a team. I just love them so much. Okay, so let's move on to Jesper. I love Jesper. I mean, I love all of the characters, but Jesper, I definitely had an extra soft spot for him from the moment he kissed his guns goodbye in the first book. He is just such an interesting character, and we don't really get much of his backstory in Six of Crows, not as much as the other characters do. So I kind of knew that we were going to get more about his life in this book, and oh boy did we get just that. Those scenes between Jesper and his father, we find out all about Jesper's past and the story with his mother. He had to struggle with his own demons of gambling, and you get to understand why he is the way that he is, and you also get to see him come to terms with the fact that he is a fabricator and that is a part of his life, and that unknowingly that has helped him shape who he is. As Wylan points out in a later scene, Jesper is able to shoot the way that he does because of his fabricator abilities. So seeing him come to terms with all that and accept who he is and start actually telling the truth to his father instead of lying to him all the time, I was so proud of Jesper in this book, and I couldn't have imagined a more perfect way for his story to go. Of course, we can't talk about Jesper without talking about Wylan. Oh my god, these two boys just, they ruined me in the best possible way. I mean, let's talk about Wylan first before we talk about their relationship. Wylan van Eck, or should I say Wylan van Sunshine, as Jesper so lovingly calls him. That's a much better name than him having to be known by his father's name, because let's talk about Van Eck, Wylan's father, Jan van Eck. Oh my god, he is such a piece of shit. I hate that man so much. I ended up utterly despising him at the end of Six of Crows for what he did to Wylan and the way he treated him. But in this book, he really takes on a whole new level of dickhead. Oh, he just... Oh my god. I have read some truly despisable book characters in my time. Zenik is right up there with the worst of them. The way he treats Wylan. Poor Wylan. My actual child, Wylan. I just wanted to adopt him and keep him safe, because he just does not deserve any of this. I really loved what we got to see of Wylan in Six of Crows, and obviously we didn't get any chapters from his point of view because of the way the ending went, but I really adored him and I wanted to know more about him, so I was thrilled that we were actually going to get chapters from his point of view in this book, and his chapters just did not disappoint at all. From the moment the story started following him, I was like, yes! I knew that I was going to adore him. I am such a sucker for these characters that are treated like shit by their fathers and cast out and have to find their own way in the world and make friends with people that they wouldn't expect to, and then own it. These type of characters are the characters that I live for, so it was predictable that I was going to end up loving Wylan. But his story was so heartbreaking and difficult to read at times. Like when we find out how he ended up leaving his house when Van Eyck told Wylan that he was going to a music school, and then he sends him off with these two henchmen and they try to kill him. Poor Wylan! And he ends up on his own, having to find his way. This boy that's being kind of pampered by his lifestyle is thrown out and suddenly has to make his way in the world. And I just loved his story so much. I also loved how he met Jesper in the warehouse that he was working in. Of course Jesper was the first one that he met. Also, Wylan's mother being alive? She's not dead at all, she's in an insane asylum. Oh my god, was that a plot twist? So that scene was utterly heartbreaking. And of course he had to see her with Kuwei's face instead of his own. And I loved how Jesper comforted him after that. So let's talk about Wylan and Jesper then. Well, first of all, we need to talk about Kuwei. At the end of Six of Crows, obviously Nina made Wylan look like Kuwei to trick his father, and so Wylan is stuck looking like Kuwei for a lot of this book. First of all, let me say that Kuwei was a fantastic character, by the way. I didn't expect him to be as funny and entertaining as he was, but he really was great and he came up with some fantastic lines. But there was that one scene, you know which scene I mean, when Jesper's having a really tough time. He'd been arguing with his father and he goes into that room with the piano and sees Wylan sitting there playing the piano, and here's me all hopeful, thinking, oh my god, they're gonna do the kiss. There's a piano. It's perfect. And then it wasn't Wylan, was it? No, it was Kuwei. Taking his chance. He saw his moment and he took it. Oh boy, did he take his opportunity. He wasn't shy about taking what he wanted. What a little shit. Honestly, that scene fucked me up so much. And the thing was, as well, going into this book, I was expecting a scene just like that. I knew that at some point there would be a case of mistaken identity, yet I still wasn't expecting it to happen when it did. I wasn't prepared, and I was genuinely tricked into believing that it was Wylan. And then when it was revealed there wasn't, I was like, of course it's Kuwei. Why did I not see that? I was just so hopeful for a Whisper kiss and thought that I was finally getting it, and it just wasn't happening. My heart like literally dropped when Jesper said that he was disappointed in the middle of kissing him, and I was like, oh my god, no, no. So I was kind of relieved when it turned out not to be Wylan, but so betrayed. But all is completely forgiven now, of course, because she did give us a kiss between Wylan and Jesper, and it was utterly beautiful. And it was after Wylan had turned back into himself again, so he didn't look like Kuwei anymore. He looked like Wylan. And it was the kiss that Jesper wanted, and it was so perfect. But yeah, they were great throughout this book, and I think they were a relationship that was more fun as well. I think they provided some really great flirting. Jesper was always saying little things to make Wylan blush, and I was living for it. And that scene right at the very end when Jesper was agreeing to stay with Wylan, and he says that his services don't come cheap, and Wylan's like, I'd like to make a down payment. Oh my god, bless my innocent little son for getting right in there with the sexiest of all flirts, even whilst he was blushing bright red. Honestly, if you give me a pairing where one of them is overly confident and flirty all the time and the other one is shy, awkward, and will blush at the drop of a hat. I am bound to fall for them so very hard. So bless Leigh for the way that she wrote Wylan and Jesper. They are so perfect, and they got a happy ending. They were allowed to live together, happy, content. But I could stand here all day and point out the various reasons why I love those two characters separately and together. But honestly, this video would just end up being hours long because those characters. Okay, so moving away from my actual reason for living, also known as Jesper, let's talk about Nina and Matthias. The love story with the less happy ending. First of all, let me talk about Nina. I love Nina Zenik so much. Honestly, she is my goddess. Everything about her character is so perfect. I love how she takes ownership of any situation she's put in. She's also a little more fun and upbeat as well, I think. Inej tends to be a lot more serious than Nina, whereas when they share scenes together, Nina brings out the more fun side of Inej. I also completely adore their friendship. There are so many quotes in this book between them two that I just love, but I'd be here all day if I tried to point them out. So yeah, now that we've established I love Nina, let's talk about her little storyline in here. After using the Joda Parem, she has a few little side effects. Nina now has the ability to raise the dead. She can't actually bring them back to life, but she can manipulate them to do her bidding. That was completely creepy. And it was also part of the story that left me with a bunch of questions because I want to know everything about that. So I want to talk about Nina and Matthias, but I think the real OTP here is Nina and food. I lived for how much she mentioned food in this book. This book made me hungry with the amount of times they mentioned waffles. Jesus, I want waffles. So lessons learned from this book is to never come in between Nina and food. I love her so much. So let's talk about Matthias. I kind of always knew that Matthias's storyline wasn't going to end well. I had a feeling that his past might just catch up with him in a tragic way. And from the moment that he locked eyes with the young Driscoll when they were doing the auction, I knew that that was going to have more meaning. So when that boy showed up at the end, I knew what was going to happen. I think it affected me more than I expected it to. I actually started crying at that scene and I didn't expect myself to cry, but it was so emotional. And I felt so sorry for Matthias because I knew that no matter how hard he was going to try to explain to this boy, he wasn't going to listen. He was always going to shoot him. So that was absolutely devastating. Another hint that it wasn't going to end well for him and Nina is that they seemed to be happier earlier on than everybody else. They got together first. They were the one that kissed first out of all of the characters. They seemed to be getting really happy and relaxed in each other's company. And I think because that was so nice and sweet, I knew that it wasn't going to stay that way. I adored their relationship throughout this book as well, because it was beautiful and it was hilarious at the same time. Those scenes between Nina and Matthias were just really great, and they provided a lot of humour to the story as well. So obviously it was utterly heartbreaking when Nina had to have Matthias taken away from her. And that final scene before he died, where he actually was determined to get to Nina and see her before he died, I was literally just tears everywhere reading that scene. This is going to sound really odd and probably very mean, but I am kind of glad in a way that Matthias did die. It's not that I didn't like his character, because I loved his character, but I feel like there always needs to be a significant death in book series or duologies. If you get to the end of a series and everybody makes it out happy, you kind of feel cheated in a way, because you do expect there to be casualties. You do expect for not everyone to make it out alive. And it made sense in a way that it gave Nina motivation as well. She's determined now to fulfill Matthias's wish. So although it was desperately sad and heartbreaking, I do think that it was crucial that Matthias did die. It was a very bittersweet ending, but I'm glad that it happened the way that it did. So they're all the main characters covered. So let's talk a little bit about that ending. First of all, it was absolutely genius. The way Kaz planned out the auction and everything else that goes on around it. I loved the chapter with Wylan. Well, when I say loved, it was the most stressful thing to read at the time. But when he was was hiding Jesper's father away, and his own father finds him and he gets information tortured out of him, and while reading that chapter you don't know that this is actually planned. So I was completely traumatized. I was like, oh my god, my poor son Wylan, he's being tortured. He's told them everything. Oh my god, no. I had to put the book down because I was just so stressed. And then of course it turns out that it was planned all along. Wylan just walks into the auction completely battered up, allowing everyone to see exactly the kind of man that his father is. I was so proud of him in that moment, and I was proud of Kaz for being the mastermind behind this. Also, the way they worked it with Kuwait made it look like he was dead so that he can escape and go to Ravka. I'm actually really happy that he got out of this alive as well, because I was wondering whether he would or not. Also, considering they have the motto, no mourners, no funerals, they made a pretty heartbreaking exception for Matthias. That little funeral scene was just so heartbreaking, and Nina was the one that actually decided to leave and go off and do what she's promised that she would do. Her ending didn't feel utterly complete to me. I know that Leigh has said that she might consider coming back to this world at some point, but it'd be quite a few years in the future. I do feel like Nina's story can definitely be picked up, whether that be in a novel a few years down the line or in a novella. There's definitely more to her story, and I have questions about Nina. And I also want to see her get the happy ending that she deserves as well. So I'm hoping that we'll have some form of continuation for her story. And she's the one that goes off with Kuwait, whilst everybody else stays behind. Utterly hilarious moment when Kuwait is going off in the boat and he's shouting things to Jesper, saying how they can learn to use their abilities together. And Wylan's like, how about I throw you in the water and see if you can swim? I am living for jealous Wylan. It's okay, Wylan, you've got your man in the end and he's living at your big house with your mother and you're happy and it's fine. So yeah, I adored everything about the ending. It was perfect and beautiful and clever. It was everything that I wanted it to be. So they were the main sort of things that I was intending to speak about. I'm just trying to think of other things that I really loved as well. When Kaz was explaining to Pekka why he held this grudge over him, and he says that whole "I don't hold grudges, I nurture them" line. That was such an iconic speech from Kaz, and I'd expect no less. Also the scene when Kaz actually goes back to the dregs to try and get people on his side again, and he starts fighting with them and allows himself to get beat up. And Inej is up on a roof somewhere watching it all happen, and she's not allowed to get involved. That broke my heart. So what other moments did I love? Oh my god, there's so many! There's a scene where Jesper and Kaz are arguing and they get into an actual fight, and then Jesper's dad just comes in. Jesper Llewellyn Fahey! Llewellyn! Perfect. What I will say about this book is that it's a lot funnier than Six of Crows was. Although it's still serious and intense a lot of the time, there are more light-hearted moments between the characters, and we get to see more of their friendship and their bond. I also loved the character development for Matthias, because in the first book, whenever the rest of the crew suggested horrible things, he was always completely horrified. And when they suggest it in this book, he's just like, that sounds reasonable. And there are just so many really great moments in this book that I could point out. In terms of criticism, there is nothing in this book that I wasn't happy with. Maybe I'm easily pleased, but honestly, this book just delivered everything that I wanted it to. So that's about all that I can think of to say right now. As always, there is probably a lot more that I want to talk about, but honestly we don't have the time. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts and feelings in the comments. Did you enjoy the book as much as I did, or was there anything that you were disappointed about? So thank you guys so much for watching. I am going to continue crying about how much I love these characters. I will see you next time. Bye!